Hi. Now I'd like to talk a bit about standard practice. Now, this quite often gets known as a standard operating procedure. The general idea in this circumstance is if you've had an accident or an incident or an unexpected outcome, there was or should have been a standard process for doing something. Now the question the investigation has to look at was the process followed? If not, where wasn't it followed? What was the consequence of it not being followed, and why wasn't it followed? If it was followed, then we have to have a look at what's wrong with the process. So we'll have a look at that. The standard practice could be as generic as ISO 9001, which tends to be, the industry term is the best practice. Now, ISO 9001 is a standard for quality management systems, the requirements for quality management systems. And over time, it has been built up to be the best wisdom in the world about how a quality management system should be built. What should be in it, what it should do, what it should achieve. But it's very generic. It's for any quality management system, for any design and production of anything. So it does need to be interpreted for a particular industry, for a particular organization, and for particular circumstances. But nevertheless, it is standard practice. And in say, quality incidents, it is possible to use ISO 9001 to go back and investigate, was the standard process followed? If you're not using ISO 9001, most organizations will have some sort of a either declared or informal process for doing things. And as I say, this is standard operating procedure. Now, we tend to expect people will actually follow the standard operating procedure, and sometimes they don't. There are sometimes reasons for this. But the general idea is the standard operating procedure is there. It's the best wisdom that people have to deal with the circumstances that prevail. And if it didn't work, then why not, and what are we going to do about it? Now the good things about standards is that they do guide in most of the circumstances. The bad thing about using an inquiry based on a standard operating procedure is that there is this tendency to answer every problem with more process. And you finish up with this huge, elaborate process where there is just too much process gets in the way, and the process itself becomes a problem. Now, one example I saw recently was that it was a change management process that was a general process for introducing changes to software systems or IT systems. The thing that was of interest to me was the number of people who had to sign it off. And it seemed that almost everybody had to sign it off. And I looked at that and thought, this is dysfunctional. There should be a few sign-offs, and these sign-offs should be significant. And it's up to those people to go check whether other things have been done. But instead of that, there was this long list of sign-offs. Now the danger in that circumstance is if you have such a long list of sign-offs, the temptation is to believe that any one of them doesn't matter that much, and so the checking of it would be tend to become quite superficial. But that's in many ways a different story. So the whole idea with the standard practice is that you do have some sort of a standard that is possibly best practice, but anyway, there is some declared standard of how things ought to be done, and in the event that things turn out not as you expect, you go back and check whether the standard process was followed. Here's an example of using a standard procedure or standard operating procedure to investigate some incident. Now in this case, it was an unaccompanied minor was flown to the wrong airport, which may seem a little bit funny, but it wasn't very funny to the minor concerned, and also to the parents and relatives. It'd be quite distressing. What actually happened was that the child was supposed to be flown from Boston to Cleveland, but instead of going to Cleveland, it was finished up in Newark. So the investigation examined, said, well, we have standard operating procedure for dealing with minors, so let's look at what happened in this case. Now you have to excuse me if I read a certain amount of this, because it's quite detailed, and the details are quite important. Now, the parents passed the custody of the child to the gate agent. This is normal. You deliver your child to the gate agent and say, okay, you've now got the child, here's his ticket, here's where they're supposed to go from and to, and here's all the details that go on with it. Okay, the gate agent escorted the child to the plane. Now there's a note here that there was an error made during escorting to the plane. So, where was it? There was more than one plane leaving from that same gate at the same time, very close together. And the gate agent did not adequately communicate to the gate staff where the child was to go to. So that was the first problem. The second problem was that the flight attendant, as you know, when you're getting on an airplane, they count the number of passengers. They've got a list of how many passengers there ought to be, and they count the number of people they've got on the plane, and the two should match. This didn't happen. Apparently they counted the number of people on the plane and just didn't notice that there was a difference between the number of people on the plane and the number of people on the passenger manifest. So that particular verification procedure was not done well. Now the flight attendant escorted the minor to the assigned seat. The passengers board the aircraft to Newark, and they count the passengers. This is wrong. And the count of the passengers on the plane was sent to the gate agent, who is supposed to check again that the number of passengers on the plane matches what the number that's supposed to be there. So there's another problem there. So all in all, we have several places where the standard operating procedure was supposed to pick up and prevent this error, and all of them failed. And the question obviously is now, why not? Now this is an example of investigating an accident using a standard or standard operating procedure. The whole purpose of the standard is that this is what is supposed to happen. If we do these things, it will all go well. Now if we don't do these things, there is potential for error. In this case, there were several places where even if you made an error in one place, it should have been picked up in another place. And these checks and balances just were ineffective in this case, and obviously the question would be asked of the gate agent and the flight attendant, well, what are you guys doing? So that's an example of investigations guided by a standard operating procedure.